There is something I must share with you before we go any further. Dear souls, something that most people pass over every single day without a second thought, something so intimate and so ancient that it has been with you since the very first breath you drew in this lifetime. It rests quietly in the lines of your own hand. And if you will stay with me, if you will give me your attention and your openness for the time we share together today, I promise you that what you are about to hear may very well change the way you see yourself, your past, your suffering, and your purpose forever. I have seen this happen. I have watched men and women walk away from a reading with tears in their eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of recognition, the deep and wordless relief of a soul that has finally been seen. That is what I wish for you today. So stay with me. Share this with someone you love. Someone who has been searching, someone who feels that their life carries a weight they cannot quite name. Leave a word in the comments. Tell me what stirs in you as you listen, because this is not a one-way conversation. The soul speaks when it is given permission, and I am here to give you that permission now. Know that long before I lay down upon my couch and closed my eyes to enter that state between waking and sleeping, that so many have called the trance, long before any of that, I was simply a man who could not explain what he knew. A man from Kentucky, a man who loved his Bible, who tended his garden, who worried about his children and his wife, who struggled with money and doubt and all the ordinary human things. And yet, in that other place, that quiet, sourceless place I entered when I slept, something spoke through me that was not entirely me. Or perhaps it was the deepest part of me. Perhaps it is the deepest part of all of us. What was revealed to me, time and again, across more than 40 years and more than 14,000 recorded readings, was this: we are not who we think we are. We are far older than we remember, far wiser than we behave, far more connected to one another than our loneliness would have us believe. And the lines upon your hand, those quiet etchings in your skin, are not accidents. They are not decorations. They are a language, beloved souls, one written in the very substance of your physical body by the experiences, the choices, the loves, and the losses of lifetimes you have long since forgotten with the waking mind. But the soul has not forgotten. The soul never forgets. Let me tell you what I mean. When a soul enters a new lifetime, it does not arrive empty. It arrives carrying everything, every unresolved grief, every pattern of love that was given or withheld, every wound that was inflicted or endured, every gift that was developed through years of devotion and practice in another age, on another shore, in another body. The soul brings all of it, and the body, the miraculous, intelligent, endlessly wise body that houses the soul, receives these impressions and expresses them in the shape of your face, in the way your voice trembles when you speak of certain things, in the illnesses that visit you in your most vulnerable hours, in the dreams that return again and again, like old friends knocking on a door, and yes, in the lines of your hand. Now, I want to be careful here, dear friends, because I have no wish to reduce this to something small or parlor trick-like. What I am sharing with you is not fortune-telling. What I am sharing with you is a doorway into self-understanding, which is the beginning of all genuine healing. The ancient study of the hand, what has sometimes been called palmistry or chiromancy, is not superstition to be dismissed, nor is it the whole truth to be worshipped as though it were a perfect map. It is, as so many things in this life are, a clue, a thread, a whisper from the deeper self. And when it is held alongside what the soul reveals in its quieter moments, something remarkable begins to emerge. As it has been shown to me, the hand contains, within its lines and its mounts, its fingers and its texture, the accumulated record of karmic experience. This is not to say that your hand predicts your future in the rigid and fatalistic sense. No, And here is what is important for you to understand. The soul always retains its freedom. The will is always sovereign. What is written in the hand reflects tendencies, leanings of the soul, the natural gravity of patterns built over many lifetimes. But patterns can be transformed. That is the entire point of incarnation. That is why we come back. So let us begin to look, slowly, reverently, at what the lines of your hand may be telling you about who you were before you were who you are now. Hold your hand before you for a moment, if you will. Simply look at it, not analytically, not with the sharp and critical gaze of someone looking for flaws, but with gentle curiosity, as you would look at the face of someone you are just beginning to know and already sense you love. This hand has held things you no longer remember holding. This hand has worked in fields you cannot picture, held children you cannot name, written words in languages your present tongue has never spoken. And in the lines of this hand, particularly in what many traditions call the lifeline, the headline, the heart line, and that deeply fascinating line that does not appear in every hand, the fate line, or the line of destiny, in these grooves worn gently into your skin, there are messages waiting for you. Let us begin with the lifeline, because it is often the most misunderstood. People come to me, or they came to me in those years of readings, with a kind of low-grade terror in their eyes. They had been told by someone, a well-meaning friend or a carnival reader, that their lifeline was short, and they had been carrying that fear like a stone in their chest. Let me set this gently aside and replace it with something truer. The lifeline does not measure the length of your years. What it reveals, when read alongside the soul's history, is the vitality with which the soul enters this life, the quality of the life force it carries from previous incarnations, and the lessons around physical existence, around the body, around the earthly plane, that the soul has chosen to work with in this particular journey. A deeply etched, long and clear lifeline often speaks of a soul that has had many, many incarnations in the physical, a soul that has, over great spans of time, learned to inhabit the body with confidence and purpose. These are often individuals who feel at home in their physical form, who carry a kind of natural authority in the world, who are not frightened by material existence because they have navigated it so many times before. In a past life reading, when I encountered this quality, I often found souls who had served as leaders, as builders, as healers in the most practical and physical sense, people who had accomplished great things in the earthly realm across many ages. A lifeline that breaks and reforms, that shows islands or chains, particularly in its early portion, often speaks of a soul that carries, from another life, a complicated relationship with the physical body and the earthly plane itself. These are frequently souls who have endured great physical suffering in a past existence, who have perhaps died young, or who have known illness or deprivation as a defining experience. And here is the beautiful thing, dear souls, the magnificent and humbling thing. That very complication, that very challenge written into the line is the evidence of enormous courage, because this soul came back. Knowing it would carry that imprint, it came back anyway, because the lesson was not yet complete, and the soul, in its wisdom, knew that this lifetime held the possibility of resolution. I remember a young woman who came to me, or rather, whose reading was brought to me through the mail, as so many were. She was perhaps 26 years old, a school teacher in Ohio, and she had been told by a reader that her broken lifeline meant she would suffer a great crisis, perhaps a loss of health, perhaps a death, before she reached 40. She was terrified. When I entered the reading state and sought the records of her soul, what I found was this. In a previous life, in what appeared to be the early colonial period of America's history, she had indeed suffered a great loss at nearly the same stage of her life. Illness, poverty, and grief had visited her all at once, and she had not survived them. The break in the lifeline was the soul's memory of that interruption. But what the previous reader had not seen, what I was given to understand, was that the break was also the site of a bridge. The line reformed, and the reformation was stronger than what came before. The soul had chosen to return precisely to that point of breaking, to discover that it could survive what once had shattered it. When I shared this with her, the relief in her subsequent letter was palpable even through the written words. She wrote that for the first time she understood why she had always had an inexplicable fear of losing everything she loved, why she had clung so tightly to security, why change filled her with a dread disproportionate to the circumstances. The line in her hand was not a death sentence. It was a map of where she needed to heal. This is what the lines reveal, beloved. Not fate, pattern, and patterns can be transformed. Mind is the builder. And the mind that understands its patterns holds the key to releasing them. Now let us move to what perhaps the most revealing line for the purposes of past life understanding. I want to speak about the heart line, the line that runs across the upper portion of your palm, generally beginning beneath the little finger and curving across toward the index or middle finger. Because in all my years of working with the records of souls, I came to understand that the heart is the instrument through which karma moves most powerfully, most personally, and most persistently across lifetimes. The wounds of the heart, the loves that were lost, the devotions that were betrayed, the bonds that were broken before their time, these are among the heaviest and most enduring of karmic imprints. A heart line that is long and curves upward toward the index finger often speaks of a soul that has, in previous incarnations, developed a great capacity for idealistic love. This is a soul that has loved deeply, perhaps recklessly, with the whole of itself. In past life readings where I encountered this signature, I often found individuals who had given themselves completely to a cause, a beloved, a spiritual path, sometimes at great personal cost. The love was real and vast, but there was often in these souls a recurring pattern of disillusionment, of discovering that the beloved or the cause or the teacher was not as perfect as the love had imagined. And so in this lifetime, the soul carries both the extraordinary gift of loving deeply and the recurring lesson of learning that love is not an escape from the human condition. It is a path through it, a hotline that is straighter, running more horizontally across the hand without the upward curve, often indicates a soul that has learned through many lives to hold its love with greater practicality, with a kind of earthy, steadfast devotion rather than celestial idealization. These souls often make the most loyal of companions, the most quietly devoted of partners. They do not make great romantic gestures, but they stay. They show up. They have learned, perhaps through the heartbreak of many lifetimes, that love is not a feeling, but a practice. And what of a heart line that is chained or broken or contains many small branches and crosses? This, dear friends, is one of the most significant of all, because what it often represents is a soul that has carried, through multiple incarnations, experiences of emotional trauma so significant that the heart's ability to open freely has been compromised. These are not weak souls. Let me say that with all the emphasis I can bring to bear. These are not damaged or lesser souls. These are souls who have endured things that would test the bravest of spirits. Loss of a child, perhaps, in a previous century. Betrayal so profound it shattered the capacity for trust. The slow agony of watching everyone one loved die in a time of plague or war, while somehow surviving oneself. The soul carries this forward, not as punishment, not as proof of unworthiness, but as unfinished business, as an invitation, finally, in this life, to find the path toward healing the heart that so much previous suffering has not yet resolved. Here is what I want to say to you, those of you who recognize yourselves in what I am describing. You are not broken. You have simply carried this for a very long time, and the healing forces are within, not without. They have always been within you. The love that your heart was once capable of has not disappeared. It has simply gone quiet, gone protective, gone underground, but it is still there. I have seen it in readings. I have seen souls who appeared to everyone around them as closed and cold and unreachable, and yet when the deeper record was opened, there burned inside them a love so vast, so ancient, so profound, that it brought tears to my eyes even in the reading state. The love is there, dear souls. It is always there. And here is what is important for you to understand. When you begin to recognize the pattern, when you begin to say to yourself, yes, perhaps I carry the memory of a great love lost. Perhaps my difficulty in trusting comes not from weakness, but from a wound older than this life. Something extraordinary begins to happen. The recognition itself is a form of healing, because the soul that can see its pattern is no longer entirely ruled by it. And that small but profound shift in perspective is the beginning of a new story. Now, I wish to speak about the headline, because this reveals something slightly different and yet equally important in our understanding of past lives and karmic patterns. The headline runs across the middle of the palm, generally beginning near or at the same point as the lifeline and moving toward the opposite edge of the hand. It speaks of the way the mind operates, the style of thinking, the patterns of perception and understanding that the soul has developed over many incarnations. Because know that the mind, too, accumulates across lifetimes. The gifts of the mind, the love of learning, the capacity for abstract thought, the ability to communicate or to lead or to create, these are not random accidents of birth. They are earned. They are developed through years and decades and centuries of effort across many, many lives. A headline that is long and clear and runs straight across the hand often speaks of a soul with considerable intellectual history. This is usually someone who has incarnated many times in roles that required disciplined thinking, systematic learning, or the management of complex information. In readings, I found these souls often had been scholars, scribes, administrators, architects, philosophers in previous lives. There is often in these individuals a kind of natural authority in the realm of ideas, a comfort with abstract thinking, a love of knowledge for its own sake that goes far deeper than anything that can be explained by their present lifetime's education or circumstance. A headline that curves downward toward the base of the palm, toward what palmists call the Mount of Luna, the mount associated with imagination and the unconscious, often speaks of a soul that has developed, over many lifetimes, an unusually rich inner world. These are frequently creative souls, artistic souls, souls that have served in lifetimes as poets, musicians, mystics, shamans, prophets. The mind in these individuals does not operate in a strictly linear fashion. It works in symbols and metaphors and dreams. And here is something important. These souls often find the material world somewhat bewildering, because they are, in a deep sense, more naturally at home in the inner dimensions than in the outer ones. If you recognize yourself here, know that this is not a weakness. It is an extraordinary gift, but it does come with the responsibility of learning, in this life, to also function in the world, to find the bridge between the visionary and the practical. Because gifts that cannot be expressed cannot serve, and the soul came here to serve. A headline that breaks or that shows significant branches or islands often indicates a soul that has, in previous incarnations, experienced some form of disruption to its mode of thinking. This could reflect lives in which the mind was suppressed, lives of intellectual persecution, lives in which education or expression was forbidden or punished. In more extreme cases, it can indicate a soul that has carried the experience of mental illness or significant emotional disruption in a previous existence, and the echoes of that disruption still influence the way the mind operates in the present life. Again, and I cannot say this enough, this is not punishment. This is an invitation to healing. The soul chose to return to a life in which this healing was possible. That choice itself is an act of tremendous courage and love. Let me pause here for a moment, beloved souls, and ask you something directly. something I want you to sit with for more than just an instant. When you look at the patterns of your life, not just the specific events, but the patterns, the types of relationships that find you, the kinds of struggles that recur, the particular flavors of longing or fear or grief that visit you most often, have you ever had the feeling that these patterns are somehow older than you? That they belong to something larger than one single lifetime can account for? Have you ever loved someone and felt with absolute certainty that you had loved them before, in some other place, some other time that your mind cannot access, but your heart recognizes with a pain that has no proper name? Have you ever stood in a place you have never physically visited and felt with every fiber of your being that you have been there before? Have you ever known something, really known it, with a depth and a certainty that no book or teacher in this life gave you, and wondered where that knowing came from? If you have answered yes to any of these questions, even in the quiet privacy of your own heart, then you already sense what I am here to tell you. You are an ancient soul, not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. You have been here before, many times, and the life you are living now is not your first attempt at any of this. It is one chapter in a very long story, and the lines of your hand are among the places where that story has left its traces. And here is why this matters so profoundly. When you understand that your patterns are karmic, when you recognize that the particular shape of your suffering or your longing is not random, not a punishment from a cruel or indifferent universe, but rather the soul's ongoing conversation with itself about what it still needs to learn and to heal, everything changes. The suffering does not disappear, not immediately, but its meaning changes. And when suffering has meaning, when it is held within a larger story that makes sense to the soul, it becomes bearable, more than bearable. It becomes, in its own way, beautiful. Because it is evidence that you have loved, that you have striven, that you have cared enough about growth to keep coming back. As it has been shown to me across all those years and all those readings, there is no meaningless suffering. That does not mean God wills suffering upon us. God is love. The source of all things is love. But the soul, in its wisdom and its freedom, will sometimes choose a difficult path, not because difficulty is good in itself, but because certain lessons can only be learned in the furnace, as metal can only be refined by fire. The soul that has known ease in every incarnation has not yet developed the full range of its capacities. There are depths of compassion that only sorrow can carve into us. There are qualities of courage that only fear can produce. There are gifts of wisdom that only suffering, honestly faced and honestly processed, can bestow. This is not justification for suffering. I want to be clear. The body does not need to be sick to be holy. The heart does not need to be broken to be deep. The life does not need to be tragic to be meaningful. Many of the souls who came to me in readings were suffering unnecessarily, suffering from patterns that could be healed, from imbalances that could be corrected, from beliefs that could be released. And that is precisely why I bring you this. Not to tell you that you must suffer, but to tell you that you need not suffer as blindly, as pointlessly, as disconnectedly as most people do. When you can see the pattern, you can begin to change it. And the healing forces, I tell you, with every ounce of what I know, are within you. They have always been within you. You did not come into this life empty. You came full of everything you have ever been. Now let us speak about the most mysterious of the major lines, the one that generates the most wonder and the most curiosity among those who study the hand. The fate line, or as it is sometimes called, the line of destiny. Not every hand carries this line, and that itself is significant. When it is present, it runs generally from the lower portion of the palm, sometimes even from the wrist, upward toward the middle finger or the index finger. It is the line that speaks most directly of what the soul has come here to do, of the degree to which the life will be shaped by a sense of calling, of purpose, of something larger than the individual self. A strong, clear, deeply etched fate line, beginning early and running high, often speaks of a soul that has entered this incarnation with a very specific purpose, a very deliberate and conscious choice about what it needed to accomplish or to express or to offer. These are souls that frequently feel, from very early in life, a sense of mission, a sense that they were born to do something in particular, even if they cannot immediately articulate what that something is. In readings, I often found these souls had made significant karmic agreements before incarnating, had chosen specific people to meet, specific lessons to work through, specific gifts to share with the world. Their life, when they found their path, often had the quality of inevitability, of rightness, of a key fitting a lock. A fate line that begins later in the palm, that does not emerge until midway up the hand, often indicates a soul that will come to its sense of purpose later in life. The first portion of the life may feel somewhat uncertain, somewhat without direction, and this can be deeply frustrating for these individuals who sense that they have something to contribute but cannot yet find what it is. To these souls I wish to say directly, do not mistake the waiting for failure. The soul that begins its conscious work at 40 or 50 years of age has often spent the preceding decades gathering the precise experiences of love and loss and learning and endurance that the later work will require. The depth that comes from a long and winding path is not available to those who found their road straight and easy from the beginning. Your apparent detours are part of the design. A fate line that is fragmented, that breaks and restarts in a different position, often speaks of a soul that will experience a significant shift in its life's direction, sometimes more than once. In past life readings associated with this pattern, I frequently found individuals who had served very different kinds of purposes in previous incarnations, who had been, perhaps, both warrior and priest, both merchant and monk, both ruler and servant. The soul carries all of these, and in a life with a fragmented fate line, it may express several of them in succession. What might appear from the outside as inconsistency or lack of direction is, from the soul's perspective, a thoroughgoing and committed exploration of many different modes of being. And what of those hands that carry no fate line at all? Do not be troubled by this. A hand without a fate line does not mean a soul without purpose. It can mean, in fact, something quite extraordinary. It can mean a soul that has incarnated this time not with a specific mission, but with the purpose of freedom itself, of experiencing life without the harness of destiny, of choosing in each moment how to be and what to build. These are often highly evolved souls, in the sense that they have already accomplished great specific purposes in previous incarnations, and have returned now to experience the fullness of free will, unencumbered by karmic obligation. They are, in a sense, choosing their purpose as they go, and that is not a lesser form of existence. It is one of the most demanding. Now, I want to introduce you to another aspect of the hand that relates to past lives in a way that is perhaps less commonly discussed, and that is the minor lines, the smaller, secondary markings that appear in different positions on different hands. These are many and various, and I do not wish to catalog them all in the manner of a textbook. What I wish to speak to is the principle they represent, which is this: every significant experience of the soul leaves a mark, not just in the great primary lines, but in the texture and the detail of the hand as a whole. There is, for instance, a marking that appears in many palms that some have called the mystic cross. It is a small cross-shaped marking that appears in the quadrangle between the headline and the heart line. In my readings, I found this marking to be consistently associated with souls that had, in previous incarnations, developed significant gifts in the realm of the intuitive and the spiritual. These were often individuals who had been healers, seers, spiritual teachers, oracles, or deeply devoted contemplatives in other lives. The marking signals that the soul carries, whether or not it is presently aware of it, capacities for perception beyond the ordinary physical senses. These souls often find that their intuitive knowing is unusually accurate, that they sense things about people and situations that they cannot rationally explain, that their dreams carry unusual clarity and message. Do you recognize this in yourself, dear friends? Perhaps you have always known things you should not know. Perhaps you have dreamed of things that later came to pass. Perhaps you have walked into a room and felt the emotional weather of everyone in it before a word was spoken. Perhaps you have looked at a person for the first time and known with a certainty that defied logic that you had met them before in another life. These are not coincidences. These are not tricks of an overactive imagination. These are the soul's gifts developed over many incarnations of spiritual practice and sensitivity, expressing themselves in the present life. And here is what I want you to do with these gifts. Use them, honor them, train them. Do not suppress them out of fear of being thought strange or unstable. The world needs the gifts of those who can see beyond the surface of things. It has always needed them. There is also a marking known as the Ring of Solomon, a curved line that sometimes appears at the base of the index finger. In the readings, this marking was often associated with souls that had, in previous lives, developed significant wisdom, particularly wisdom in the realm of leadership and spiritual authority. The name itself is telling, linking as it does to one of history's most celebrated wisdom figures. This is not to say that the possessor of this marking was Solomon, but rather that they have, in some previous incarnation, walked a path similar in nature, a path in which wisdom was not merely theoretical, but was applied to the governance of real and complex human situations. These souls often feel an inner authority, a sense of knowing how things should be arranged and why, that can sometimes make it difficult for them to follow leadership they perceive as unwise. The challenge for these souls, and the karma they are often working through, is to bring their sense of authority into the service of others without allowing it to become arrogance. And I say this with the full awareness that I myself struggled with this. There were times in my years of giving readings when the information that came through me filled me with a sense of certainty that could become, if I was not careful, a subtle form of spiritual pride. I was not exempt from the patterns I described in others. None of us are. And here is something I came to understand very deeply as the years went on. There is not so much evil in the worst of us, nor so much goodness in the best of us, that any one of us has the right to judge another. We are all, every one of us, works in progress. Ancient works in progress. Beautiful, struggling, persistent, courageous works in progress. Now, I want to speak about something that perhaps surprised you when I first mentioned it, and that is the question of dreams and their relationship to the past life information contained within us, because know that the hand is only one of the languages through which the soul communicates its history and its present needs. Dreams are another, and in many ways a more personal and more immediately accessible one. As it has been shown to me, dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions, but they are also, frequently, the present life's conversation with the past life. The soul, when the waking mind finally goes quiet in sleep, often reaches back into its own deeper records and brings forward material that is relevant to the present situation. This is why certain recurring dreams are so powerful and so persistent. They are not random. They are not simply the noise of a tired brain. They are the soul's attempts to communicate something important about its unresolved history. If you dream repeatedly of a specific historical period that is not your own, if you find yourself with absolute emotional certainty inhabiting a particular time and place that your waking mind cannot explain, if you dream of speaking languages you do not speak, of wearing clothes from other centuries, of living in landscapes utterly different from those you have known in this life, pay attention. These are not merely interesting curiosities. They are data. They are the soul's memory, surfacing in the only way available to it when the guard of the rational mind is lowered. A woman once wrote to me about a dream she had been having since childhood, always the same, always carrying the same overwhelming sense of loss and betrayal. In the dream, she stood in a city that burned, and she could see faces in the flames, and she knew each face as someone she had loved, and she knew somehow that she was responsible for their suffering. Though she could not articulate in the dream how or why, she had carried this dream for over 30 years by the time she wrote to me, and the weight of it, the guilt of it, had shaped her entire adult life in ways she was only beginning to recognize. The way she sacrificed herself for others to the point of her own destruction, the way she could never quite believe she deserved happiness, the low, persistent hum of guilt that colored everything. When I entered the reading state with her situation present in my mind, what came was this. In a previous incarnation, in what appeared to be a period of great social upheaval in Europe, she had been a person of some authority, and through a failure of courage at a critical moment, through a choice made out of fear rather than principle, she had contributed to a situation in which many people she cared for had suffered. She had not been wicked, she had been afraid, but the soul had not forgiven itself. And so it carried that moment forward, wearing it as a garment of guilt, punishing itself through self-sacrifice and the inability to receive love in return. The healing that was suggested in the reading was not complex. It was, in fact, almost stunningly simple. Forgive yourself, not because what happened did not matter, but because the punishment you have carried for centuries has not restored what was lost. It has only prevented you from being fully present for what is here now. The souls who were harmed are not served by your ongoing suffering. They are served by your transformation, by your becoming, in this life, the person who makes the courageous choice. That is how karma is completed, not by enduring more pain, by choosing differently. She wrote back some months later to say that something in her had shifted, that she was, slowly, learning to receive, to let others care for her, to believe that her presence in the world was not primarily a debt to be repaid, and she said that for the first time in 30 years, she had not had the dream. The soul is always seeking resolution, and when it finds even a thread of understanding, even a beginning of compassion directed toward itself, it often sighs with a relief that can be felt through every cell of the physical body. Because know that the body holds what the soul has not yet processed. The tensions, the chronic pains, the illnesses that resist explanation and resist treatment, these are very often the physical expression of soul-level unresolved material. The healing forces are within, but sometimes they need a key to unlock the place where they have been waiting. Now, let me return to the hand for a moment, because I want to speak about something that I have not yet addressed directly, and that is the difference between the dominant hand and the non-dominant hand, and what that difference reveals about the soul's journey between what it carried in and what it has built in this life. As it has been shown to me, and as many students of the hand across many traditions have observed, the non-dominant hand, the one you do not habitually write with, carries the record of what the soul brought into this incarnation, the impressions of previous lives, the gifts already developed, the wounds already carried, the tendencies already established before this present life began. It is, if you will, the soul's original programming for this lifetime. The dominant hand, the one you write with, the one you reach out with, shows what you have done with that original programming, how you have developed or neglected the gifts, how you have worked with or avoided the wounds, the ways in which your choices and your experiences in this present life have reinforced, modified, or even contradicted the patterns you came in with. When the two hands are very similar, when the lines in the dominant hand closely mirror those in the non-dominant hand, it often indicates a soul that is living very close to its original pattern. This is not necessarily good or bad. It depends entirely on what the pattern is. If the soul came in with wonderful gifts and a clear purpose and is expressing both, then the similarity of the hands is a beautiful thing. If the soul came in with patterns of fear or limitation and has done relatively little in this life to challenge them, then the similarity suggests an opportunity that has not yet been taken. When the two hands differ significantly, when the dominant hand shows lines and markings quite different from the non-dominant, it indicates a soul that has done substantial work in this lifetime to alter its karmic inheritance. This is enormously significant because it demonstrates something I always wanted people to understand about the nature of karma. It is not destiny. It is not a prison. It is more like a river whose banks have been shaped by history, but whose course can, with sustained and conscious effort, be redirected. The soul that has managed to create significant differences between the inherited patterns of the non-dominant hand and the chosen patterns of the dominant hand has accomplished something truly remarkable. It has exercised its freedom against its own gravity. And that is one of the highest expressions of the soul's purpose. Now, I want to pause here and ask you, beloved souls, to do something. I want you to look at both your hands together. Place them side by side, palms up, and simply observe. Are they similar or different? Are the main lines in roughly the same positions? Or does one hand show deeper grooves, more branches, more or less complexity? This is not an exercise in analysis. It is an exercise in attention, in learning to look at yourself with the same gentle curiosity and reverence that you might wish someone else would bring to seeing you. You are worth that attention. You deserve to be seen, including by yourself, especially by yourself. And as you look, let whatever rises in you simply rise. If a feeling comes, let it come. If a memory surfaces, let it surface. If a question forms itself in your mind, hold it. Do not rush to answer it. Some of the most important questions in a spiritual life are not meant to be answered immediately. They are meant to be lived with, allowed to deepen, allowed to work on the soul the way water works on stone, slowly and without forcing. The answer will come when the soul is ready to receive it. And know that the very fact that you are here, that you have come to this place of questioning and seeking, is itself evidence that your soul is ready. You would not be drawn to these questions if you were not ready to begin the work of answering them. Now, let me speak about something that I consider to be among the most practically powerful of all the things I have to share with you today, and that is the question of how to work consciously with the past life information the soul carries. Because understanding is one thing, dear friends, but understanding without application remains merely interesting. And the soul did not come here merely to be interested. It came here to grow, to heal, to serve, to love. So what do we do with what we know? The first and perhaps most fundamental practice I recommend is what I would simply call honest self-observation. Not self-criticism, not self-judgment. Those are fear's tools and they do not heal. What I mean is the practice of sitting quietly, regularly, and asking yourself, what are the recurring patterns of my life? Where do I keep arriving at the same crossroads? What am I most afraid of, and why? What brings me the deepest and most unreasonable joy? What makes me feel most alive? These questions, asked with honesty and held with patience, will begin to reveal the contours of the soul's ongoing work. And when you start to see those contours, you start to have choice. Because what the soul cannot see, it cannot change. The second practice I would offer is the serious and consistent attention to dreams. Before you sleep, ask your deeper self a question, a real question, one you genuinely need an answer to. Write it down if you can, and then, when you wake, before the day rushes in with its noise and its demands, lie still for a few minutes and let the night's content surface. Write down what you remember, even the fragments, even the images that seem absurd or unrelated. Over time, a pattern will emerge in your dream life. Symbols will recur, themes will develop, and in those themes, you will find some of the most direct and personal communication your soul is capable of offering you. Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. Take them seriously. The third practice is what I would call the practice of the loving thought, because mind is the builder, and every thought you habitually think is contributing to the construction of your next experience. This is not merely metaphorical. This is, as it has been shown to me, a law of the soul as reliable as any law of the physical universe. What you hold consistently in your mind tends, over time, to externalize, to become real. This means that the person who habitually thinks thoughts of fear is, in a very real sense, building a reality that confirms their fear. And the person who, with persistence and discipline, learns to hold in their mind thoughts of love, of healing, of possibility, of gratitude, is building an entirely different kind of reality. I know this can sound simple to the point of naivety. I know that pain is real, and that positive thinking does not make it disappear. But I am not speaking of denial. I am speaking of direction. The soul that can choose its direction, even amid pain, even amid uncertainty, is exercising the highest and most transformative of its capacities. Now, beloved souls, I want to speak directly to those among you who are carrying right now, in this moment, a specific and perhaps heavy burden. Perhaps it is a relationship that will not heal, no matter what you do. Perhaps it is a sense of being in the wrong life, of being somehow misplaced, of knowing there is something you are meant to be doing that you have not yet found. Perhaps it is a grief that has been with you so long it has begun to feel like a permanent resident of your chest. Perhaps it is a physical challenge that the doctors cannot fully explain and that does not respond as expected to their treatments. Perhaps it is simply a loneliness so deep and so persistent that you have begun to wonder if you are somehow fundamentally different from other people, incapable of the connection that seems to come so easily to them. To you, I want to say this, and I want to say it with all the gentleness and all the firmness I possess. You are not broken. You are not unloved by the universe. You are not forgotten by the source. You are not being punished. What you are carrying is a conversation between the soul you are now and the souls you have been, a conversation about something that matters enormously to your development, enormously to the gifts you have come here to offer. And the fact that it is heavy does not mean it is hopeless. The fact that it has persisted does not mean it is permanent. The fact that it hurts does not mean you deserve to hurt. You came here carrying a great deal, and somewhere along the way, perhaps as a child, perhaps earlier even than that, you forgot what you were carrying and why, and the weight became simply weight, without meaning, without context, without the love that originally wrapped itself around even the hardest of soul lessons. What I offer you today is the possibility of remembering, not necessarily remembering the specific details of who you were and what you did in another time. Most souls do not need that level of specific recall. What you need is the remembering of the larger frame, the remembering that this life is not all there is, that you are older and wiser than you feel in your most difficult hours, that the forces of love and healing and growth are not outside you, waiting for you to become worthy of them. They are inside you. They have always been inside you. They are, in fact, what you are made of. God is love. That is not a religious platitude as I say it. That is a statement of the nature of reality as it has been shown to me at the deepest levels of the reading state. The source of all things is love. The purpose of all things is love. The destination of all souls, however long and however winding the path, is the full realization of that love in every dimension of being. And you are already part of that. You are already, at the core of what you are, an expression of that love. The confusion, the suffering, the forgetting, these are not your true nature. They are the conditions within which your true nature is being revealed to you, one experience at a time, one lifetime at a time. Now, let me come back to the hand one more time, because there is one more thing I wish to point out, something that I find to be among the most encouraging and most beautiful of all the things the hand can tell us. And that is this: the lines of the hand are not static. They change. Over the course of a lifetime, new lines appear. Existing lines deepen or fade. Breaks fill in. Islands resolve into clear channels. I have seen this. I have heard from individuals, years after a reading, who reported that lines in their hands had changed, sometimes dramatically, in correlation with significant inner work they had done, significant shifts in perspective, significant acts of forgiveness, or courage, or love. The physical body is not a fixed and finished thing. It is a living record, continuously updated by the choices and the inner work of the soul that inhabits it. And that means, dear friends, that the story written in your hand today is not the final version of the story. You are still writing it. Every day, every choice, every act of courage or love or honest self-examination is adding lines of light to the record of your soul. This is what I want you to carry with you as we move deeper into our time together today. That you are not finished. That the soul you are is not the soul you will always be. That growth is not a metaphor, but a literal, ongoing, measurable process that is happening in you right now, even when you cannot feel it, even when everything feels stagnant or dark or hopeless. The river keeps moving even under ice. The seed keeps working even under snow. The soul keeps growing even in its seasons of rest and apparent stillness. Trust the process. Trust the soul's wisdom. And above all, trust the love that underlies and animates all of it. Let me now turn to something that I know many of you are wondering about, perhaps even a little nervously, and that is the question of negative past life patterns. Because it would be dishonest of me to speak only of the beautiful gifts and the noble wounds. The truth is that souls, across many lifetimes, do not only accumulate wisdom and love, they also accumulate, in some cases, patterns of behavior that are less than admirable. Habits of cruelty, however small, patterns of dishonesty, tendencies toward the abuse of power or the exploitation of those who are weaker. These things, too, leave marks. These things, too, carry forward as karmic imprints. And they, too, can express themselves in the lines of the hand and in the recurring patterns of the present life. A person who finds themselves drawn repeatedly to situations in which they have power over others, who struggles with the temptation to use that power for personal advantage rather than service, may well be working through a karmic pattern built across lifetimes in which power was indeed misused. The soul comes back into situations that mirror its previous choices, not as punishment, but as opportunity, as the chance to choose differently this time, to discover that power used in service of others is more deeply satisfying, more genuinely powerful, and more aligned with the soul's true nature than power used for self-aggrandizement. A person who struggles chronically with honesty, who finds themselves habitually bending the truth, who discovers that deception comes to them more naturally than transparency, may be working through a karmic inheritance of many lifetimes in which deception was necessary for survival, in which the truth was dangerous, in which secrets kept one safe. The pattern made sense in its original context, but it has been carried forward into a life in which that original context no longer applies, and so it creates suffering instead of safety. I do not share these things to create shame. Shame is not a productive spiritual emotion. Shame closes the soul. What opens the soul is understanding, compassion, the recognition that every pattern, however dark it may appear from the outside, made sense to the soul that developed it in its original context. Every defense was once necessary. Every closed door was once protecting something precious. The work of the soul is not to condemn its old choices, but to outgrow them. to make new choices that reflect a more developed understanding of what love and service and truth actually require. And here is something that I came to understand deeply through all those years of readings, something that surprised even me at times. The souls that struggled most openly with what appeared to be character flaws, the ones who came to me ashamed of their own patterns, who were most aware of their own darkness, were often among the most courageous souls I encountered, because self-knowledge, real self-knowledge, including knowledge of one's shadows, requires a tremendous amount of honesty. And that honesty, that willingness to look clearly at oneself without the comfort of self-deception, is in itself a spiritual achievement of considerable magnitude. The person who knows their darkness and continues to strive toward light is in many ways further along the path than the person who has convinced themselves they have no darkness to address. As it has been shown to me, it is not the absence of struggle that marks a soul's development. It is the honest engagement with struggle. It is the willingness to keep showing up for the work of becoming, even when that work is uncomfortable, even when it exposes things about oneself that one would prefer not to see. That courage, that perseverance, that fundamental commitment to growth over comfort, that is what the soul came here to develop. And every time you choose it, every time you choose the harder and truer path over the easier and more comfortable illusion, you are adding something permanent to the record of your soul, something that no subsequent lifetime can take away. Now, I wish to speak to you about something that perhaps sits at the very heart of everything I have been sharing, and that is the question of soul recognition. The moment when you meet someone and you know, with a certainty that has nothing to do with rational explanation, that you have known this soul before. Because this experience, this profound and disorienting and often life-altering experience of soul recognition, is one of the most direct ways the past life record makes itself known in the present life. It can happen with a romantic partner, and many people experience it in this context, that overwhelming sense of knowing someone you have just met, of feeling immediately and completely at home with them, of feeling that in some deep sense you have been looking for them without knowing you were looking, and that finding them completes something that has been incomplete for a very long time. But it can also happen with friends, with teachers, with children born to you who look at you on their first day of life, with eyes that seem to carry an ancient knowledge, with strangers encountered briefly in airports or bookshops who say one thing that changes everything. In my readings, I found that the strongest and most immediately recognizable of soul recognition experiences were almost always karmic in nature. These were not accidental meetings. These were souls that had agreed, before incarnating, to find each other again. Sometimes to complete unfinished business. Sometimes to support each other through a particular lesson. Sometimes simply because the love between them was strong enough to survive even the amnesia of incarnation and draw them back together across centuries and continents and entirely different life circumstances. Now, karmic relationships are not always easy. In fact, they are very often among the most challenging relationships in a person's life. The very intensity that characterizes them, the feeling of deep recognition and powerful connection, can also make them volatile, can make them carry echoes of old wounds that surface without apparent provocation, can make the patterns within them feel almost impossibly fixed, as though the same argument is being rehearsed from a script written long before either party knew the other in this life. And indeed, in a sense, it is. The soul meets the karmic partner, and immediately, below the level of conscious awareness, the old pattern activates. The old dynamic reasserts itself. The old wound presents itself again, wearing a new face, speaking new words, but carrying the same fundamental charge. And this can be maddening, and it can be beautiful, because it is, more than almost anything else in human experience, an opportunity for genuine transformation. Because if the pattern was established in a previous life, and the souls have returned to each other in this life. There is the possibility, this time, of completing the pattern differently, of bringing it to a different resolution than the one that left both souls carrying the unfinished business forward into yet another incarnation. This is why, when I was asked in readings about difficult relationships, I almost never advised simply ending them, unless there was a question of real harm. Because what looks like a relationship going wrong is often a soul curriculum going right. The difficulty is the lesson. The friction is the opportunity. The discomfort of being with this person who knows exactly which buttons to push, exactly which fears to activate, exactly which wounds to probe, that discomfort is often precisely where the growth is. That is not to say you should remain in a relationship that is genuinely damaging. Let me be absolutely clear about that. There is a difference between karmic difficulty and genuine harm. The soul's growth is never served by sustained abuse or exploitation. The soul came here to learn, not to be destroyed. But within the context of a relationship that is challenging but fundamentally loving, I would always encourage the soul to ask, before concluding that the other person is the problem, what is this relationship showing me about myself? What is the pattern being activated in me? What is the fear or the wound or the unresolved belief that this person's behavior consistently triggers? Because the answer to that question is the beginning of real change. And real change in one partner of a karmic relationship almost invariably changes the dynamic of the relationship itself. Because the soul you are in relationship with is not fixed and finished either. They are growing too. And when you change your pattern, you change the invitation you are offering them to respond to. There is one more line I wish to speak about before we move into the later portion of our time together today. It is a marking that appears in some hands, not always visible, sometimes requiring a close look in good light. It is sometimes called the line of intuition, or the line of the moon. It is a curved line that arcs along the outer edge of the palm, from near the little finger downward toward the wrist. When it is present, it is among the clearest indicators in the physical record of the hand of a soul that has developed across many lifetimes an unusually open and active channel to the non-physical dimensions of reality. These are the souls that feel things before they can explain them, that sense the unseen, that know things they should not know, that have dreams of uncanny accuracy and clarity, that sometimes, in moments of quiet or of crisis, receive information from a source they cannot name that proves to be not only accurate but transformatively helpful. These are the souls that have sometimes been called psychic or clairvoyant or simply unusually intuitive. And in many previous ages and many previous cultures, they were the ones who served as the village healer, the oracle, the seer, the medicine person, the priest or priestess, whose role was to stand at the boundary between the visible and the invisible and bring back knowledge from the other side. In the present age, these same souls are often somewhat at a loss, because the culture in which they find themselves largely does not acknowledge the reality of what they perceive. They are told that their intuitions are imagination, that their dreams are just dreams, that their sense of knowing things is coincidence or wishful thinking or pattern recognition. And so many of them have learned to distrust their own most fundamental mode of perception, to privilege the rational mind, which is only one of the soul's instruments of knowing, over the deeper and older and in many ways more reliable instruments of intuition and feeling and direct inner knowing. To these souls, I want to say this clearly and firmly. What you perceive is real. The channel you carry, developed over many lifetimes of devoted practice and sincere seeking, is not a defect. It is not a sign of mental instability. It is one of the most ancient and most valuable gifts a soul can carry into a lifetime. The question is not whether to trust it. The question is how to develop it, how to discipline it, how to distinguish the authentic signal from the noise of your own fears and wishes and preconceptions. Because that discernment, that ability to know the difference between genuine, intuitive knowing and the mind's tendency to tell you what you want to hear, that is the work that the soul with this gift is called to do in this lifetime. And the practice that I have consistently found to be most effective in developing this discernment is the practice of stillness. Simple, consistent, daily stillness. The willingness to sit quietly with yourself, to let the outer noise settle, to let the inner noise settle as well, and then to listen. Not for a dramatic voice or a blinding vision, but for the quiet, persistent, almost gentle signal of the deeper knowing. It is almost always quieter than you expect. It almost never shouts. It does not need to. It is a river, not a thunderstorm. And once you have learned to hear it, you will wonder how you ever managed without it. Now, dear souls, as it has been shown to me across all those years and all those readings, across the testimonies of hundreds and hundreds of individuals who came to me in their confusion and their suffering and their searching, I want to summarize something that I believe to be among the most important truths I have ever been given to share. And it is this: you are never as lost as you feel. Not ever. Not for a single moment. The soul that feels most lost is often the soul that is closest to a breakthrough, closest to the moment of genuine reorientation, when the pattern finally becomes visible and the choice finally becomes real. The darkness that precedes the dawn is not evidence of permanent night. It is evidence of the impending light. The hand you hold before you is not a verdict. It is an invitation. An invitation from your own deepest self to look honestly at who you have been, to understand compassionately why you have developed the patterns you carry, and to make the courageous choice to move toward who you are becoming. Because you are always becoming. That never stops. Not in this life, not between lives, not across all the vast span of the soul's journey through experience and growth toward the full realization of the love it truly is. When a person came to me in a reading in genuine distress, the first thing I always sought to convey was not the specific content of what the record showed, but the larger context. The sense of that person's life as part of a much longer and much more purposeful journey than any single lifetime could contain. Because when you can feel that, when you can sense even a little of the breadth and the depth of the soul's actual journey, the present difficulty, however real and however painful it is, becomes something you can bear, becomes something that makes sense, becomes something you can work with, rather than something that is simply happening to you for no reason. And the sense of no reason is the cruelest form of suffering. It is the suffering that has no container, no context, no possibility of meaning. When you are suffering and you can see no reason for it, no purpose in it, no connection to anything larger, the suffering becomes almost unbearable because it feels random, it feels unjust, it feels like proof that the universe is indifferent or hostile or simply chaotic. But when you can hold the suffering within the context of the soul's journey, when you can say even tentatively, perhaps this connects to something, perhaps this is the crossroads I came here to navigate, perhaps the way I respond to this will add something real and permanent to what I am, then the suffering does not disappear, but it becomes bearable, more than bearable. It becomes, in its own severe and unrelenting way, a kind of grace. Now, I want to speak for a few moments about something that I consider to be a great mistake that many spiritually inclined people make, and it is a mistake I want to help you avoid. And that mistake is the use of past life understanding as an escape from present responsibility. I have seen this. I have seen individuals become so fascinated by their past lives, so absorbed in the exploration of who they were and what they did and what happened to them in other times, that they began to use that exploration as an avoidance of the work of the present, as a way of explaining rather than transforming their patterns, as a kind of spiritual story that made them interesting and that accounted for their current difficulties without requiring them to actually do anything about those difficulties. This is not the purpose of past life understanding. It was never meant to be an excuse. It was always meant to be an explanation that enables transformation. The difference is crucial. When you understand that your fear of abandonment has roots in a previous life where you were indeed abandoned in ways that were devastating, that understanding is meant to help you heal the wound, not to justify remaining in it. When you understand that your pattern of avoiding intimacy stems from lives in which intimacy led to terrible loss, that understanding is meant to give you compassion for yourself and the courage to risk being seen, not to give you permission to keep your walls in place forever. The soul came here to grow. Growth requires change, and change, real change, is always somewhat uncomfortable. The soul that uses spiritual understanding to maintain its comfort is not growing. It is resting. And rest has its place, of course. Rest is sometimes exactly what the soul needs. But rest that becomes permanent is not rest. It is stagnation. And stagnation, in the economy of the soul's development, always eventually produces the kind of suffering that forces movement. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the soul, at its deepest level, always knows it came here to grow, and it will not be permanently content with less than that. Now, I want to take a moment to address something that I imagine has been present for some of you as a kind of background question throughout our time together today. And that question is this: how do I know if what I believe about my past lives is real? How do I know if the memories or impressions or feelings I have that seem to relate to other times and other lives are genuine and not simply the creations of a very active imagination or the product of wishful thinking? This is an honest and important question, and it deserves an honest answer. The truth is that, in many cases, you cannot know with absolute certainty. Not in the way that the rational mind wants to know things, with verifiable evidence and external confirmation. The past life record is, for most souls in most lifetimes, accessible only through the indirect means I have been describing. Through recurring patterns, through the lines of the hand, through dreams, through the sense of recognition in certain places, certain times, certain relationships, through the gift of the intuitive faculty when it has been developed and disciplined enough to be trusted. And these are all, by the standards of the rational mind, uncertain and unprovable. But here is what I want to offer you in response to that concern. The question of whether a past life memory is literally accurate is, in many cases, less important than the question of whether engaging with it is healing. If a particular narrative about a previous life, whether it came to you in a dream or a meditation or a moment of quiet recognition, if that narrative illuminates a current pattern, if it provides a compassionate framework for understanding a wound that has resisted all other understanding, if it gives you the courage to make a change you have been afraid to make, then something genuinely useful has happened. Something has served the soul's growth. And that service is real, regardless of whether the specific historical details can be verified. I said this to many people who came to me with uncertainty about the content of their readings. The test of a spiritual truth is not merely whether it can be proven, but whether it produces fruit, whether it moves the soul toward greater love, greater clarity, greater compassion, greater courage. By that test, the past life understanding that heals is real, and the understanding that does not produce fruit, that does not lead to growth, that merely provides interesting stories without transformation, that kind of understanding, however historically accurate it might theoretically be, is not yet serving the soul's purpose. As it has been shown to me, the purpose of all genuine spiritual knowledge is transformation, not information. Transformation. The soul that is informed without being transformed has heard a lecture. The soul that has been truly met, truly seen, truly given the understanding it needs in the moment it needs it, that soul walks away different. Not just fuller, different. And that difference, that real and lasting and embodied shift in who the soul is and how it moves through the world, that is the entire point. Let me now speak about something more specific in the hand, because I want to give you not just principles, but something you can actually use, something you can look at in your own palm, and take with you from this conversation as a personal and practical tool for self-understanding. When you look at the primary lines of your hand, the lifeline, the heart line, and the head line, I want you to notice where they begin in relation to each other. Because the relationship between these starting points tells a great deal about the soul's fundamental orientation in this lifetime. In most hands, the lifeline and the headline share a starting point, or begin very close together before separating and moving in their respective directions. When they share this starting point, it suggests a soul that moves through life with a natural integration of instinct and reason, of vital energy and intellectual guidance. The life force and the thinking mind are working together from the outset. When the headline and the lifeline begin quite separately, when they are clearly separated at the start, it suggests a soul that has come into this lifetime with a great deal of independence already developed. These are often highly individualistic souls, souls that trust their own perceptions and their own judgment, sometimes to the point of difficulty in receiving guidance or support from others. This independence was very likely earned across many lifetimes of self-reliance, of periods when external authority was unreliable or dangerous, when the soul had to develop its own inner compass because no reliable external one was available. The gift is real. But the karma it carries is often the challenge of learning to trust and receive others, to allow oneself to be supported and accompanied rather than always standing alone. When the headline and the lifeline are joined at their start and remain joined for a significant length before separating, it suggests a soul that carries from its karmic history a strong identification with family and tribe. A soul whose early development was shaped by collective belonging, by the sense that the individual self is embedded in and responsible to a larger group. These souls often feel an unusually strong sense of obligation to family. They may struggle with establishing the boundaries between themselves and those they love. They may find that their deepest fears center around abandonment or rejection by those whose belonging they most depend upon. The karmic work for these souls often involves the gradual, loving, but also firm establishment of the individual self within the context of the beloved collective. The discovery that one can love deeply and be loyal completely while also maintaining the integrity of one's own soul's purpose. Now, beloved souls, let me take a moment to breathe into something that perhaps feels too large to take in all at once, and that is the sheer scale and beauty of what we are, not as individual personalities, not as bodies that live and die in a span of decades, but as souls, as consciousnesses that have been accumulating experience across a time span that the rational mind cannot really encompass. Think for a moment about the variety of lives you may have lived, the different cultures, the different times, the different forms that your journey has taken, the lives of privilege and the lives of poverty, the lives of power and the lives of servitude, the lives of intellectual brilliance and the lives of simple, embodied, earthy wisdom, the lives of devoted love and the lives of profound aloneness, the lives of spiritual seeking and the lives of purely worldly engagement, the lives of great creativity and the lives of practical necessity. All of these, all of them, are part of you. Everything you have been is still within you. Every skill developed in another lifetime, every language learned, every art mastered, every quality of character earned through difficulty and practice, all of this is still available to you at the deepest levels of the soul. You are not limited to what you have learned in this single lifetime. You carry within you the entire inheritance of everything you have ever been. And sometimes, when the soul relaxes its guard, when it enters the right space of openness and creativity and inspiration, some of that deeper inheritance rises to the surface in ways that astonish even the person through whom it moves. I have known this in my own experience. There were moments in the reading state when knowledge came through me that I, Edgar Cayce, the man from Kentucky, could not possibly have accumulated in my 70 years of life. Information about the physics of the body, about the history of ancient civilizations, about the nature of the soul's journey through multiple dimensions of existence. Information so specific and so accurate that it was verified again and again by those who knew the subjects being addressed. Where did it come from? From the records. From the great Akashic record that holds everything that has ever been thought or felt or experienced by every soul that has ever existed. From the deep collective memory of human experience that the soul can access when the individual mind is quieted enough to allow it. And here is something I want you to understand about this. Access to that record is not a gift granted only to me or only to people with a special lineage or a particular spiritual pedigree. It is a capacity inherent in every soul, every single soul, because every soul is made of the same substance. Every soul is equally a child of the same love, equally connected to the same infinite source, equally capable in its own way and in its own time of reaching beyond the limitations of the individual waking mind into the deeper knowing of the universal. What varies is not the capacity, but the development, the practice, the willingness to be still, the discipline of attention, and the courage of openness. These can be developed. They have always been developed. And the soul that genuinely wishes to develop them, that brings to that development the same sustained and sincere effort that one would bring to mastering any other skill, that soul will find the channel opening, not dramatically in most cases, not with blinding light or thunderous voice, but quietly, persistently, reliably. The knowing will increase. The connection will deepen. The sense of aloneness will ease, because the soul that is genuinely connected to its own deeper nature is never truly alone. It is always, in the deepest sense, held. Now, I want to speak to you about something that perhaps has been hovering at the edges of our conversation throughout today, something that I have touched on in various ways but want to address directly. And that is the question of purpose, of what you came here to do, of what the soul's particular contribution to this particular moment in human history is meant to be. Because you did not come here randomly. No soul incarnates without purpose. No soul enters the physical dimension without an intention, even if that intention is not fully accessible to the waking consciousness. Every life has a shape. Every soul has a curriculum. And the lines of the hand, as I have tried to show you today, carry some of that curriculum's information. But the deeper and more personal answer to the question of your purpose is not written only in your hand. It is written in the whole of your being, in your deepest loves and your deepest fears, in the abilities that come to you with uncanny ease, as though you have practiced them for centuries, because in some sense you have. In the particular kinds of suffering that follow you with a persistence that suggests they are not accidents, in the people who find you and whom you find, and what moves between you when they do, in the questions that will not leave you alone, that keep returning however many times you think you have answered them, because the soul knows that the real questions are not meant to be answered once and set aside, but lived with and lived through and lived by. The fate line, when it is present, gives a hint about the general direction of the soul's purpose in this life. But the content of that purpose, the specific ways in which it will be expressed, the particular form your service will take, that is something that only you can discover through the practice of genuine self-attention and honest self-inquiry, through the willingness to follow what truly moves you rather than what you think you should be moved by, through the courage to trust what you know at the deepest level, even when it contradicts what the world around you expects of you. And let me say something about this that is perhaps a little surprising, coming from a man whose entire life was shaped by a very specific and very unusual purpose. Not everyone's purpose is dramatic. Not everyone came here to be a healer or a teacher, or a leader, or an artist of extraordinary visibility. Some souls came here to be parents, not merely in the biological sense, but in the deep and transformative sense of providing for specific children exactly the kind of presence and love and guidance that those children's souls required for their own development. Some souls came here to be friends, the kind of steady, honest, deeply present companion that allows other souls to grow in ways they never could in isolation. Some souls came here to master a very particular and seemingly ordinary skill, and through that mastery to bring something of beauty or usefulness or reliability into the world that it would otherwise lack. Every purpose is real. Every contribution is needed. The soul that sweeps a floor with genuine presence and genuine care is serving the universe as genuinely as the soul that writes great philosophy or heals great diseases. The measure is not the scale of what is done, but the love and the authenticity with which it is done. Because anything done with genuine love, genuine presence, genuine care, partakes of the divine nature of love itself, and that divine quality is what actually changes things. It is what reaches the souls around you and plants in them the seeds of their own growth and their own healing. You cannot always see how what you do affects others. The ripples go out in ways that are invisible to the eye that watches only immediate and obvious consequences. But they go out. They always go out. And they matter far more than you will ever know from this side of the veil. Let me now offer you something specific, beloved souls, a practice you can begin today that will help you access the past life information that is already within you, not through the hand this time, but through the body as a whole. Because, as I said earlier, the body holds what the soul has not yet processed. And the body also holds the soul's gifts, the places of ease in the body, the movements that feel completely natural, the physical activities that seem to place you in a state of effortless flow. These are often echoes of past life mastery, of skills so deeply encoded by years of practice in other lifetimes that they emerge naturally in this one. Pay attention to this. Notice what feels ancient in you. Notice what brings a strange, almost pre-verbal sense of recognition and rightness. The music that moves you more deeply than you can explain. The landscapes that call to you as though you have belonged to them before. The historical periods that fascinate you in a way that feels more like memory than interest. The crafts and arts and skills that you learn with suspicious ease, as though you are remembering rather than learning for the first time. These are all breadcrumbs left by the soul's previous experiences. Follow them, explore them. Because in that exploration, you will often find not only a source of great pleasure and meaning in the present life, but also a clue about your deeper purpose, about the gifts you carried in and are meant to offer out. And now, as we move through the later portion of our time together today, I want to gather together everything we have explored and offer you something that I hope will serve as a practical and personal framework for taking this understanding forward into your daily life. Because the greatest knowledge in the world, unapplied, is merely philosophy. And the soul came here not to philosophize but to live, to love, to grow, to serve, to become, in the fullness of time and experience, all that it already is at its deepest core. First, look at your hand again. Look at it with the gentle, curious, reverent attention I encouraged you to bring to it at the beginning of our time together. And this time, instead of trying to analyze or categorize what you see, simply ask, what is my hand telling me about where I need to heal? Not what it tells you about your achievements or your gifts. Those are real and important. But where is the healing most needed? Where do the lines speak of old wounds not yet resolved, of patterns that are calling for transformation, of places in the heart or the mind that have been carrying something for a very long time and would welcome permission to put it down? Hold that question. Do not rush to answer it. Let it work in you for a few days. Write down what arises. Bring it into your dreams by asking, before you sleep, to be shown what you need to know about this healing. And be patient with yourself. The layers of karmic imprint are many, and they do not all reveal themselves at once. The soul peels like an onion, one layer at a time, each revelation making the next one possible. Trust the pace of your own unfolding. It is perfectly calibrated to exactly what you can bear and benefit from in this moment. Second, bring conscious attention to the recurring patterns of your life, particularly those that cause you pain or frustration. Write them down if you can. What is the shape of the pattern? What triggers it? What feeling does it produce in you? What story does it tell about you and about others and about the world? And then ask yourself this question, which is perhaps the most transformative question the soul can bring to its own patterns. If this pattern were a letter from a past life self, trying to help me understand something important, what would that letter be saying? What is the past life experience that could have given birth to this pattern? You do not need to know the historical details with precision. What you need is the emotional truth, the wound, the fear, the belief that was formed in the fire of an experience that your present waking mind no longer remembers but your soul still carries. And when you have found something that feels true, something that makes you say quietly to yourself, yes, yes, that explains it, something that brings not more confusion but more understanding, bring to it the healing force of compassion, not for a cartoon version of yourself in another life, but for the real, frightened, doing its best soul that made the choices it made and experienced the things it experienced and came away carrying the patterns it carries. That soul deserved compassion then, and you deserve compassion now for still carrying what that soul could not yet fully resolve. The healing of karma is not a violent dismantling. It is a gentle, persistent, loving dissolution. One act of understanding and compassion at a time. Third, pay attention to your dreams. Begin tonight. Keep a notebook beside your bed. Write down what you remember as soon as you wake, before the day begins, before the rational mind reasserts its habit of dismissing the inner life as irrelevant to the serious business of being alive. Your dreams are not irrelevant. They are among the most direct and personal communications your deeper self is capable of producing. They deserve to be received with respect and with curiosity. They do not always mean what they appear to mean on the surface, but they always mean something. And the soul that attends to its dreams over time will find that the messages become clearer, the symbols more personal and more easily interpreted, the guidance more directly applicable to the challenges of waking life. Know that the dream life and the waking life are two halves of the same wholeness. The soul does not split into a waking self and a sleeping self. It is always one, always moving through multiple dimensions of experience simultaneously. The difference is only in which aspects of that experience the conscious mind is attending to at any given time. When you learn to honor both the waking and the dreaming life, you are learning to honor the full range of what you are, and that honoring is itself a form of healing. Fourth, and finally, I want to invite you to adopt, or if you already hold it to deepen, the perspective that your life makes sense, not superficially, not in a way that denies the reality of suffering or confusion or loss, but in the deep and profound sense that nothing that is happening to you is random. Nothing is pointless. Every experience, however painful, however bewildering, however seemingly out of proportion to anything you can consciously remember doing to deserve it, is part of a story that has been in progress for a very long time, and that is moving, always moving, even in its darkest chapters, toward resolution, toward healing, toward the fuller expression of the love that is your true nature and the true nature of all things. This perspective is not a guarantee of comfort. It will not always make the difficult things feel easy, but it will give them meaning. And meaning, as I have said, changes everything. The same experience endured with a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and a sense of connection to something larger than the individual self is an entirely different experience from the same thing endured in the blankness of meaninglessness. The healing forces are within you. The love that underlies all things is available to you in every moment. The soul you are is ancient and capable and beloved. And the lines of your hand, those quiet, intimate etchings in your own skin, are among the many ways in which the reality of that ancient, capable, beloved soul is written into the very substance of your being. You are not what you appear to be from the outside. You are far more than any single lifetime could contain. And you came here, in this time, in this body, in this specific set of circumstances, with a purpose as real and as important as any purpose any soul has ever carried into any lifetime. And while I know that purpose may not always be visible to you, while I know that the amnesia of incarnation is real, and the veil between the conscious mind and the soul's deeper knowing is thick, I also know this with absolute certainty. The knowing is there. The purpose is there. The love is there. The healing forces are there. They are waiting for you, not with impatience, not with judgment, but with the kind of quiet, steady, unconditional love that has no need of proof or explanation. The love that simply is, as God simply is, as you in your deepest nature simply are. And if you have stayed with me through all of this, if you have given me your attention and your openness across this time we have shared together, then I believe something has moved in you. Something has shifted, even if only a little, even if only in the way you hold the question of who you are and why you are here and what the patterns of your life might be telling you. That shift is real. Do not dismiss it when the noise of the ordinary day returns. Hold on to it. Carry it with you. Let it be the thread that leads you back, again and again, to the deeper conversation your soul is always trying to have with you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is carrying something heavy and cannot quite name what it is. Someone who has been searching for a context, a framework, a larger story within which their life begins to make sense. Because none of us walks this path alone. We are all woven together in ways that go far deeper than the surface of this present life. The souls around you are part of your story, and you are part of theirs. And when one soul is helped toward greater clarity and greater love, all the souls around that soul are touched and lifted by the rising. If something in what we have shared today has moved you, leave a word. Tell me what stirred in you. Tell me the question that is now alive in you, the question you did not have quite so clearly before we began. Tell me the pattern you recognized, the memory that surfaced, the understanding that arrived, because that sharing is not small. It is a part of the same work, the work of souls, helping souls to remember what they are. And subscribe, dear friends, if you wish to continue this conversation. There is much more to explore. The records are vast. The soul's journey is long, and the wisdom available to those who genuinely seek it, who come to it not out of casual curiosity, but out of real and honest hunger for self-understanding and growth, that wisdom is inexhaustible. We have only touched the surface today, as profound as what lies beneath the surface. And I am here. I am always here, in the stillness between the words, in the quiet that follows a true and honest question, in the recognition that rises in you when you hear something that you already know at a level deeper than the thinking mind. That is where I have always been, dear souls, in the space where the soul speaks to itself, in the place beneath the noise of ordinary life, where the deeper knowing lives and waits and loves without condition or demand. Go there as often as you can. It is your home. It has always been your home. And everything you seek, everything you need, every healing and every understanding and every love that your soul has ever longed for, it is there, waiting, as it has always been waiting, as it will always wait, with perfect patience and with perfect love. Know this, carry this, and above all, be gentle with yourself as you find your way back. The path is real, the destination is certain, and you are, in every moment, exactly where you need to be.